Kum Lenen Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Chav Ches. We are up to the very bottom of the page, Chav Zayin on the base. We went through the whole mission, a number of discussions regarding Oisei Hayim, the day that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was replaced, Rabbi Gamliel. The Mishnah starts off saying that just like the water, she has consequences for her behavior, so too, Oisei, someone else also has consequences, and the water affects that person as well. Plus, just like she's forbidden to her husband, she's also forbidden to this, to the adulterer. So now the Gemara, and we had an argument, how we learned it out. The first thing I want to know, Oisei, when you said that there are consequences from the water, who is this Oisei? Who's affected by it? Elam is about the husband, what did he do wrong? In fact, we learned before that some is a mitzvah for him to be mekana his wife. If you can tell me what it means is the is bay oven. If the husband, by any chance, committed something wrong by having relations with her after this entire episode, then but maya, the water will affect him. If he taka committed a sin, then not only doesn't even affect her, because the water wouldn't affect her at all. So Vatanya, we learned clearly, it says in the pasuk that the person is innocent, and then that woman will carry her sin. So we dash. When is the water effective? As the husband is innocent, then the water will actually do its job. But if he's not cleansed from sin, in other words, if he did have relations with her after she became usad, now that she's been categorized as a Sotah, then ain't amayim baikin, it doesn't affect her either. So what does the Mishnah say? Talking about the person, the adulterer. Says the Gemara. So why did the Mishnah just spell it out? Listening to the then the next day when it talks about she is prohibited to the husband, she's prohibited to the adulterer, it doesn't say oisay, it says lebayil. Lebayil says there clearly lebayil. So why in the beginning when it talks about the consequences of the water doesn't mention the boil by name? Really does mean the boil. But when it comes to the Reisha, we say the water affects her. So we use the contrast is, and also him. Seifa, when we talk about the husband, we say the word Baal, Baal. We talk about the husband that she's forbidden now to live with her husband, Tana Boil. It says also regarding this adultery, it calls him Boil. Anyway, the Kiva learns out why. It says Ubo. It says twice the word Ubo. The question is he saying because there are two different psukim where it says a bow, it says a number of times Ubo, like Ubo Hamayim Hamarim, that the water will come in effect, or is it because the one word bow has above in it as well? Says the Gemara, our question is it because it says one word bow? Could have said bow, it says bow, Ubo Kamar, it says in the water, the cursed water will come in, and so on and so forth. Oi Ubo Kamar. Oh, because two times it says the word Ubo. Says the Gemara, Toshma, come in here. Just like it's forbidden to the husband, it's forbidden also to the boil, to adulterer. Shenema, it says in pasuk nitma'ah v'nitma'ah. So it says nitma'ah v'nitma'ah sounds clearly Rabbi Akiva is dashing above. So here by a bow, the same thing, he's dashing above, not because there's twice, repeated twice, but because the one word has an extra bow. Says he what about dying to boy? That in itself is the question. When it says in nitma v'nitma, does it mean nitma'ah, the nitma'ah, that means it's does it mean that it's a one word and the vav? Is he dashing that? Or nitma'ah v'nitma, is he dashing actually two different psukim where it says the word nitma. It says that he suddenly decided to warn his wife, and vihi nitma, and she divided him and she became tummy. That's one pasuk. So it says vihi nitma, or it says she give her drink of water, and if she became tummy, and so on and so forth. And this will so again it says nitma and says vinitma. So is it because there's two different sukkim or not? Says the Gemara, it says in the pasuk that zois tyrus and hakanois, it says vinitma. So what does he mean there? It repeats the same word, or because of the letter vav? First we're coming here. Midiktoni, because it says safe in the Sefer Rebbe Mishnei Pamim, because it says in the Sefer twice. Rebbe says twice in Nitma. Hamburim Parsha Nitma Echel Bar Leboil Mekal Rebbe Kiva. What's the argument that Rebbe Kiva also says it says twice Nitma? They're not arguing. Obviously, Rebbe Kiva says only once, but Bavi Kadosh. Rebbe Kiva says it says Nitma, but there's a vav and it dashes twice. So obviously, Bo same thing, like extra vav. Rebbe doesn't dash the vav, and so he says we learn out that Echel Vav because it says two different twice. It says twice the word Nitma. So now we have according to Rebbe Kiva 6 psukim because every time it says a vav, it's an extra pasuk. Chad, one of them is let's have it says 3 times the word uba'u. And now that we explained that what the vav is extra, so suddenly you have 3 ba'us and 3 vavs. So suddenly 6 times. And why do you have to have 6 times? One is tzavah telling you that this is what Hashem said. It decrees what's going to happen. That these bitter waters are going to come and make her intestines swell and so on. And the other one is everything is the counterpart. So there's her and him, that's 2. Then there's not the decree of Hashem, and now that this is what you actually have to do. And and one is also that to notify that this is what's going to happen, and because of this behavior. And again, so therefore, there's an extra, and one for him and one for her. That's why we have 6 times. The Rebbe, he omits all the vavs. He only has it 3 times. So he only says that it's all about her, and we learn him from the fact that he was involved. That's why he also gets punished. The Rebbe, so according to Rebbe, Kashem, since the fact of the matter is that these people are going to talk about her, how does Rebbe know that he also gets involved? But Rebbe, Kashem, Shamayim, how does he know? No, he learns out from Meditani because it says, Meditanya, it says in Litzbai's button, it says in the pasuk that his stomach, Latzbai's button, his stomach will swell, the land pearl, Yorech, and the thighs will fall, collapse. Bitnai the Yerecha Shaboil. That's talking about the adulterer. How do we know? Maybe it means hers. Maybe it means her. We have another pasuk where it says in the pasuk with Safsa Bitna, her stomach will swell, the Nafla Yerecha, thighs will collapse. We already know about her. Mani Mekayim Latzboy's button. Why do we need the other pasuk to say that stomach will swell the Lampol Yerech? And to tell you that what? That the thighs, the Lampol Yerech thighs will collapse. That what? That beat the Yerecha Shaboy. One is talking about her, one is talking about him. The Ida, according to Rabbi Kiva, he can learn everything from him from this pasuk here. Why does he learn from the extra vowels? The Ida, you know what the pasuk for the Moidula is notifying Koyim, even though the pasuk says first that that the thighs will collapse in the stomach. Never to tell you that you should know about the poil. So you shouldn't in any way say, "Oh, the Torah Chashon was inaccurate." The bottom, Bereisha B'Hoda Yorech. The stomach is first, and then the thighs. Despite the fact that she's falling apart, she still will say, see, the Torah wasn't so accurate. The Idach and the other one will say. So that's why you need this pasuk here again to tell you, make you aware that the system of the process, how it's going to work. Even though the thighs, mentioned first the first time, but the fact of the matter is the water, when it works its way down, start with the stomach and then go down to the thighs. Either and the other one. Let the pasuk say her stomach and her yerech, my bet in yerech. What the Rebbe says? Why is it bet in yerech? Shmamanol boil. It comes to teach you both. Maybe it only comes to teach you about the boiling. If it's only coming to teach you about the adulterer and not to tell you that the process, then it should say my bet in the other. The 2 things in there. First of all, that it's affecting the adulterer, and second of all, this is the process. One of the Rishonim says that, interesting, the Torah refers to this water a number of times of hame'orim, mei hame'orim, that this cursed water, that Mei HaMa'orim is a total of Mei HaMa'arim. HaMa'arim is in Gematria. Reish and Reish is 400. Mem is 80, and Yud is 90. So that's 290, 490, and Hey and Aleph is 6. That's 496. If you divide 496 in half, it's 248. The Ramachi brought him to a person. even though it does say that a woman has an age nun beis ivarim, but generally a person has ramach ivarim. So we'll talk about ramach ivarim, and double that is 496. So this may hama'arim, this cursed waters will affect the limbs of two people, of the boyel and the adulterer and the woman. Saying about it further, Omar Rabbi Shua says, Rabbi Shua says, this is how Chaya dashed. Tan Rabbanan, we learned in the pasuk. Look at the pasuk. Sholosh pamim amud in the parsha. It says 3 times in the parsha the word nitma. In one pasuk it says in the parsha like this: "In nitma, if she becomes tamei, if she's guilty." It says that if the husband warned her, and not to be in solitude with this person, and she became, he says in pasuk, he nitma, she became tamei, or he warned her and she did not become tamei. He loy nitma. So it says im nitma. Then it says again another pasuk, nitma became tamei, and then it says vin nitma became tamei. Lama. So I need 3 times the word nitma. 3 times you become tamei. As if there are 3 consequences here. The echad the baal, once she's tamei to the husband that wanted, she can no longer live with the husband. The echad the boil, that she can no longer live with the adulterer, and the echad the truma. Normally, if a bas kohen marries Yisrael, and then they get divorced or he dies, if she had no children, she can revert back to being a single bas kohen and she is entitled to eat from truma. But in this case here, if she was a Sotah, then even though she was divorced, she cannot go back to eat truma. Those words of Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel says that not all that Rabbi says that you should know that she also, if the husband, let's say, then dies, so she was not divorced and she's merely a widow, she could never marry a kohen again. And Rabbi Shmuel says, how do I know that? And it sounds like he's arguing with Rabbi Akiva, and we don't understand how he's arguing. Rabbi Akiva didn't mention a word about whether she can live with a kohen in the future. She can't. And Rabbi Shmuel seems to argue and says, yes, definitely she cannot live with a kohen in the future. If she cannot revert back to her status of being a bas kohen to eat truma, then surely she can no longer marry a kohen. Why is that surely? So he says, because there are instances where she can eat truma even though she cannot marry a kohen. For example, if she's a divorcee, she would tell us for truma. A divorcee, if she was divorced by her husband and she's a bas kohen, she goes back home and she eats truma, but she can no longer live with a kohen because she's a divorcee. So we see living with a kohen is far more chomer than going back to truma. This case of here by a Sotah, you're telling me she's asura b'truma, she's also b'truma, so surely she can never live with a kohen again. And it is still could. Now, what exactly Rabbi Shmuel is responding to? The Kiva will see me. So what does it mean now? In Pasuk, first it says warned her, but he nitma, and she did become tamei. That sounds like she definitely became, a Sotah. That means she definitely was Zaina, and she can no longer live with her husband. And so it's like a new subject. And then it says he loy nitma, and then it says in the pasuk, and if she's innocent and nothing actually happened. So what's going on here? Im nitma, if we say that she definitely is guilty, then why drink? The whole purpose of the drinking is to verify whether she's innocent or guilty. But you tell me in nitma she became tamei. Why drink? If you're so convinced that she drank, and if you tell me that she's innocent, then again, what's the problem? And why give a drink at all? She's innocent. What it means is we're not sure, we're doubtful. The Torah can tell you that a suffix over here is asur. We don't know. Did she become tamei? Did she not come tamei? And therefore she becomes asur. So Taish already asked the interesting question: if it's a suffix, if she became tamei, suffix or not, then we know every suffix mat Torah l'chumra. So why do you need a pasuk? Why do you say in nitma lo nitma? And so cases, there's a famous argument, the Rashba and the Rambam. The Rashba holds that every suffix min ha-Torah is min ha-Torah l'chumra. So therefore, Taisus hold like the Rashba when he asked that very question. Since every suffix min ha-Torah l'chumra, what do I need to hold in a Sotah for? Since the suffix whether anything happened toward or not, so therefore we're going to be machmir. And so why do you need a special pasuk for? The Rambam, however, holds that a suffix min ha-Torah l'kula, it's midrabanan l'chumra, and of course you need a pasuk to tell you that it's also min ha-Torah. But why do you need a pasuk over here? The Shev Shmaitzer talks about this. Barichas explains the argument of the Rambam and the Rashba. And so we have a mamze vade asur rachman le'v'loy mamze suffix doesn't that prove that a suffix min ha-Torah is l'kula. We can argue the other way around. The fact that we have to learn that means that generally Sotah Daf and everyone else discussed that at length. Yet Traces wants to say over here that this suffix of Sotah is different than all other suffixes. All others is actually, to understand this a bit better, you have the Rivosh. There's a Tshuva of the Rivosh where he explains, very interesting, why do we have a concept that a suffix matter l'chuber, but if it's a sex faker, which means it's a doubt, in a doubt, then we're makel. Why we makel? So he explains that there are generally three categories. Either something which is asur, something which is category number one, category number two, which is a step lower, something which is suffix asur, and category number three, something which is mutter. There's nothing in between. So when something is a suffix asur, fine, it falls under category number two. If you have a suffix in that suffix, we're no longer in category number two. The only other category that we have available to us is category number three. And therefore, Taisa as follows. Based on that reverse, we can explain. What Taisa is saying here is that the Torah tells you here that this does not fall under the realm of a suffix. By a Sotah, it becomes like a vada. The reason why she cannot live with her husband is not because we don't know. It's because that's a din. A woman that we don't know after she's being warned, that din is that even though she's a suffix, if anything happened or not, she's us. If it turned out to be she's innocent and the husband and lived with her at the time, he still committed an avela because she is us. Not like an ordinary Taisa says interesting thing. Let's say if a suffix of this treif or not treif, and you went ahead and you ate it, it turned out to be later that it wasn't treif, you're no longer considered over the avela in the full sense of the word. Even though similar to what we had in Nazir about a woman who didn't know that her husband canceled or annulled her netted to become a Nazir to that window that he has right to, and she went ahead and continued eating, drinking wine, she committed a sin. Hashem yistlach, Hashem should forgive her. She obviously committed a sin, but it's a much lesser sin than someone who actually committed a sin. So Taisus is a mechadash here, and you can only understand Taisus if you follow the Rivosh. So there's only three categories, and the chiddush by Sotah is since it's no longer in the category of an ordinary suffix, so what else? It's catapulted into the first category, which is what? That's like a vada is. Taking my further. Suffix is forbidden. We cannot have done. And here we learn out the shed. So we learn out here regarding general tumah, and that is as follows. Sotah, just like by Sotah, by a Sotah, if a woman, let's say a shegig happened, where Rashi gives an example where the husband didn't realize that this is it wasn't his wife, it was another married woman. He thought it was his wife, and she didn't realize it wasn't the husband. She thought it was the husband. So they're both innocent in this case. It sounds like from Rashi that if the husband knew that it wasn't his wife, even though she didn't know, it might not, the din and the outcome might be different. So shaking is innocent. You wouldn't have this law of Sotah. Or Einas Karatzin, if she was coerced into it, you wouldn't have the law of Sotah. Also, and yet we say that what? That if there's a suffix, if she committed a sin or not, we treat it like as if she committed it, like a badai. It's sheretz. A sheretz is a sprinkle. Also by sheretz, you say that if you didn't know, if whether you knew, you didn't know, it makes no difference. If you come tummy, your tummy. And Einas Karatzin will make no difference, you coerced or not, if you touch your tummy. Ain't a din, surely the din should be she yasik by suffix kavadai. Surely the din should be that a suffix should be just treated just like kavadai. So from here we learn out the idea of suffix by suffix tumah. Yeah, we learn out the idea of the suffix tumah at all because we use the word the nikma by a Sotah, so therefore we learn out a suffix tumah. This is what we learn out. Since we are learning out from Sotah, we actually compare it to Sotah. Mas Sotah to Shusay Yachid, just like a Sotah is only in a private place. When do we say a suffix tumah? We're not sure if it's tummy or not. We're machmed only if it's in a private place. But if it would be in a public place, it wouldn't be so. In a public place, in the Shusay Rabim, suffix tumah Rabim is tar. What's the definition of Shusay Rabim? So we learn out from Nazir. By Nazir, it says we had in the Sechta Nazir, on Daf Zayin, that if somebody says to two people, I saw that one of you became tamei. I don't know which one of you, you were two Nazirim. They said, I know one of you became tamei. I don't know which one of you became tamei. And the din is that they both have to go through the whole rigmarole of bringing karbanos, and they make a whole condition that, if I'm the one who's tamei, then I'm bringing something, the carbon tumah, and you're bringing voluntary carbon, so on and so forth. So that's the question. But there are three people there. If there are three people there, it's a subject to Mishus Rabbim, it should be Torah. Gemara gives us the answer. He was standing in the distance. So what do we learn from there? That Mishus Rabbim over here is not like the criteria of Mishus Rabbim, but we have the above, Sechta Shabbos or even where there's all the different criteria. No, Mishus Rabbim here is that three people are there. Three people are there. So if and by a Sotah, Mishus Yachid is only she and the adulterer. So everybody has a question: how come the Rambam paskins that if there were two adulterers and she was warned against both of them, they were there three together? The din is that it's machmir when we just said here that three people, Savitum Mishus Rabbim is tar. The answer is very simple. Where do we learn that three people from Gemara Nazir? Over the Gemara Nazir, the person observing has nothing to do with these two people, is not part of the equation here. So therefore, we say if there's another outsider, the two people, that's Rosh Hashanah. In the case of the Sotah, all three are involved. She's part of the party. She and the two the Sotah, because they're all, even though they're three people, but because they are all involved in the Isser over here, therefore that's not considered Rosh Hashanah. We need an outsider there, it's not part of it. So we continue learning. And another thing we learn from Sotah is a standard rule. We have in Marnid, in other places, Mas Sotah, and just like Sotah. Lover she yet by das lishol. A Sotah, you can ask her if anything happened or not. Is at sheretz dover she yet by das lishol. Sheretz. When do we say the suffix tumen by machmir? Is only if, let's say, a person touched something and we're not sure whether he touched or not touched, so we can ask. But if, let's say, there's no person touching at all, where there's an animal they're holding some tummy, the question is whether the animal touched a keli or not. That's called ein by das lishol or not. And then we're not machmir. So only if there's a person involved in the question, did you touch this or didn't you touch this? And the person says, I don't know, but it's a davar sheyesh b'das l'shol. Says the Gemara. So this is the rule. Davar sheyesh b'das l'shol, a davar, something that the person is involved, b'shus ha'yochid, tzvei ketame. Safik is tame. B'shus ha'rabbi, tzvei ketoyer, the safik is toyer. B'shein b'das l'shol, but no, b'shus ha'rabbi, tzvei ketoyer. Now, whether Rosh Hashanah seems to the Gemara here that we learned Rosh Hashanah as well, which is the Shittas Rashi and a number of the Shayim. We also had in the Tesis and Nazir, in Nida, that some of the Shayim hold that no, all we learn is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is Torah because we have no limit to say that it's tummy, therefore it's Torah because we have the Cheskes Torah. Till now you were Torah. Question is, anything changed? Well, Rosh Hashanah, we assume you're Torah. The whole limit that we need from Sotah is Rosh Hashanah because the question is, till now you were Torah. Your Chazaki, your status quo says that you're Torah. You want to change that situation, then we have to come along and say, we need a special pasuk, a special limit. And the others say no. The reason why we need to learn from Sotah that a Shus Rabbim is Torah is because that goof is Allah Sinai is even though the Cheskes Torah because it's Raglayim L'Dover. The fact that he warned her and so on and so forth gives us some credence, that maybe something did happen. But in an ordinary case, Shus Rabbim, you don't have to. Even by Sotah, you need a special halacha that a Shus Rabbim is Torah. In other cases, you might not even need it because there's no Raglayim L'Dover. And we're going back to the situation between Rabbi Shmuel's discussion, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. We don't understand Rabbi Shmuel's response about a kohen. Rabbi Kiva didn't mention. All he said was that she can no longer eat truma if she's a Sotah. He didn't mention at all whether she can marry a kohen or not. What's Rabbi Shmuel saying? He says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, truma, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva is talking about truma. Comes along Rabbi Shmuel and talks about she can no longer marry a kohen. Number one. So Rabbi Akiva, Kunim, and all how to takana. Since Rabbi Akiva has 3 times when we learn from there that the third one is Baal Boil, the third one is that she can no longer go back home to eat truma. How do you takana that she can no longer marry a kohen? The Chitain, you're going to tell me that Kuhuna Loy Tzichakra. You're going to tell me that you don't really need a pasuk to teach a Kuhuna. Shahari also a suffix since we treat a Sotah, which is only a suffix if she did anything wrong, whether she committed adultery, and we treat her like a vadai, and therefore, obviously, a kohen cannot marry a zayin. Therefore, she cannot marry a kohen. Then Truma also doesn't need a pasuk. Then Truman doesn't need a pasuk either that she cannot go back because we know a zayna cannot go back. Shari also b'safik zayna because if we treat her like a zayna, then we know that she cannot go back. It says the pasuk if she is each zar, she marries somebody that she's not allowed to marry, then she can no longer eat truma. So she's a zayna. She's a zayna for the cannot marry a kohen. She's a zayna for eating truma. Why need a minitma for that? Ella, Rabbi, you're right. Rabbi Kiva Taka learns out she cannot marry a kohen from a pasuk. There are 4 v'nitmas. How do you get 4 nitmas? Arba kroi ksiva. There are 4 written. How? Because it says 3 times nitma. One of them has a vav, and Rabbi Kiva dash is vavim. So chad lebal, chad leboil, and And the bechad lekunin, the last one is for that she can no longer marry kohen, and the last one is the biggest chiddush bechad letruma. She cannot go back to truma. And Rabbi Shmuel doesn't agree with this extra vote that we had before. Rebbe didn't also agree with Dash and the vote. So Rabbi Shmuel is only 3 psukim. Ksiva, chad lebal, chad leboil, and one is for truma that she cannot go back home. So how do you know she cannot marry a kohen? So for that you have a kavuchayim, and the kavuchayim, and the kuhuna asir bekavuchayim, and the kuhuna we learn out that she cannot go back to kavuchayim for divorcee who could go eat truma cannot marry a kohen, and surely this woman here, the Sotah, cannot eat truma, go back home to eat truma by her family, so surely she cannot marry a kohen. So the obvious question is, if it says only one word v'nitma, we always try to learn the lesser chiddush, which will be a lesser chiddush that she cannot marry into kahuna. So maybe like a grusha, but maybe she could go back home. We only have one v'nitma. How do you know what to learn from there? On the contrary, let's learn from there that she cannot marry a kohen in the future, but she could go home and eat truma. Rabbi Shmuel, my, how do you know these are called truma? Ukuhunas kavachayim, and you say the pasuk is talking about truma and kahuna kavachayim. Dilma ki itzur lekahuna. Maybe the pasuk is going to teach her she can no longer marry a kohen, but truma shaya. She could go back to her family truma. Amalach, he said, Mistabra, it makes sense. Dumya the Baal boil. We're comparing since the first group psukim we're learning out she's forbidden to her husband, forbidden to her adulterer, and they're both talking about in the life of her husband that she cannot go back to her husband. Obviously, her husband's alive. She cannot marry the adulterer even now while the husband's alive. So the same thing also when we say that she cannot go back to the kuna, we're talking about while the husband's alive. Now, if the husband's alive, then the only way she could be free is she's divorced. If she's divorced, she can anyway not marry a kohen. So obviously, we need a pasuk to tell you that she cannot marry into kahuna. It's talking about the husband died before he gave her divorce. So she's a widow, and a widow generally is permitted to marry a kohen, and in her case, she can't. So therefore, that's talking about after he died. That wouldn't then be similar to the cases of being forbidden to her husband. Obviously, he must be alive, and to the adulterer. That's why we say it's talking about going back to truma while the husband's alive. She cannot go back to her family. Ma ba'al boil l'chaim while he's alive. The case of kuna, the lacha misa can only take place after the husband died. She's a widow. The husband didn't give her a divorce yet, and she became a widow. And telling you cannot marry a kohen, generally a widow could. But keep it, do me the ba'al boil less that he doesn't agree with this word. Or inami isla, even if he holds it. Why do you have to have 4 v'nitmas? Let me just learn kavachayim and middle. So the asi kavachayim, we have a general rule. Things which are written in Kedusha and other places. Things which are written, we can learn kavachayim. Torach the cost of lakra. Sometimes the Torah decides to write it down as well. Okay, have a good day.